everyone, and welcome to the second part of our e-learning tutorial. Today we will show you how to create and define skin elements that take advantage of the e-learning functions which we have already explained in part 1 of the tutorial. These skin elements allow the user to monitor his or her performance at all times, to see, for instance, how many items he has to find in this particular scene or panorama, how many points he can obtain in this panorama before moving on to the next one. So if we move on to the next panorama, this number could change. How much time he has left, or what's the time he has already used up. So these timers could be increasing or decreasing. The total score that we achieved so far in the tour, and even progress bars. And this progress bar can relate to different characteristics. In this case, it's showing where we are with regard to the entire walkthrough that we have to navigate. So we have a total of 5 panoramas, and we can see that we are currently in panorama 1. And if we move to the next one, this bar advances to show that we have already visited 2 panoramas out of 5. And this is not something you have to do manually or anything, but instead there's a new component just for that. Instead of using the number of panoramas for the progress bar, you can also base it on the number of hidden hotspots found, on the number of points achieved, or on the actual time remaining. And with all these elements being part of the software's Skin tab, your options to customize, combine, and personalize these elements, and therefore your tour, are limitless, as you may be used to from other non-e-learning related skin elements that you have already been using in 3D Vista. In this example, for instance, we made a skin that's much more of a video game-based style, where you can see the points and shots here, the time, and down here a health score. For instance, when we shoot a target, our points here go up, whereas when we get hit, this progress bar down here decreases, our health gets worse. So in technical terms, we created 2 scores for this tour, one increasing one that collects points as we hit targets, and the second one that decreases as we get hit. So the skin definitely lets us target a virtual tour much more to its use, whether it's a classical teaching tool or a more game-based tool. Or like this one, which we created for medical training and where the indicators change depending on the scenario that we are in and the specific quizzing tools used in them. See how the other second indicator disappeared because there's no hidden elements in this panorama, it only has a number of quiz cards. So the possibilities to customize all this go far beyond just, say, changing the color of the items. Now, how do we create these elements so that they automatically account for what's going on in the tour in terms of e-learning? These elements are based on dynamic texts or variables, which you may already know from tours where you have the panorama title change automatically according to the media currently playing. These dynamic texts can be inserted by means of any of these 3 skin elements: label, multi-line text, or text buttons. Okay, so you have to be using one of these 3 elements. I already created my multi-line text element here. I just inserted a text here and then changed the font, color, etc. Now to insert the variable, we click this new button up here and we'll see a list of all available variables. The first 2 are the ones we already had before e-learning, but now you no longer have to manually insert them, you can simply select them here. And after that, we have the entire brand new list of all e-learning related variables. That may seem at first overwhelmingly long, but really it's just one group of different variables, which first are listed applying to the general tour, and then they all repeat, but applied on a media level, and lastly, they all repeat, but applied to scores. You'll start to get a hang of all the variables quickly, and then you can quickly go and select them on the level that you need them or want them, and you don't have to manually adapt them in terms of what level they should apply to. So that makes it much easier. So here's what the variables mean. Items found refers to the number of items we already found, whereas items means the elements or hotspots to which the author assigned the action count to score. Items count would be the total number of items in general in the entire e-learning part of the tour. So how many elements with the action count to score are there in this tour? Answered questions would be in our quiz cards. How many questions have we replied to already? How many questions are there in total? The score would show the score that we currently have and the total score achievable in the tour. And here the time and countdown options, the time left for finishing the tour, the time that's passed already, the time limit overall that we have in order to go through this tour. And then we have these variables, which now, instead of to the entire tour, refer to the media that we are currently in. So if we are in one panorama, this specifies how many items we have found in this panorama already. So how many of the ones with the action count to score. This shows the total number of these elements present in the current panorama, so the same action as before, but not for the entire tour, but instead for the media that the user is currently in. Media index is the number or position of media in which we currently are. For instance, if the tour has 5 panoramas and we are currently in panorama 2, then this would show a 2. Media count is the number of media we have in our tour carousel or playlist. And visited media count shows the number of media we have already passed or visited. So that would be like the progress bar we saw before, where we had already been in 2 of the 5 panoramas. While that was a progress bar before, we can also show that as just a numeric indicator, or 2 out of 5. And down here we repeat all of them again, but now they specifically reference or refer to score 1. So this is for cases where you have more than one score, which we'll demonstrate later in this video. If you only have one score in your tour, you can just use the general variables that we had at the top of the list. But if you have 2 or more scores, then you should select them directly down here. Right, let's go ahead and insert our first variable. And as you can see, it directly inserts the text. We can also copy that line and paste it into another skin element. The list that we just selected from is just to support, so you don't have to actually know these commands or variables and type them in. And we can also edit the style or format of the text like any other. Okay, let's check how this would show in the tour. You can see it shows the value 0 because we have not yet found any of the items in here, and the variable was quiz items found. But as soon as we click on one of the hidden items, this reflects in this indicator and shows that we have found one item so far. This variable counts the items found in the entire tour. But I want to change it to this one, which you may remember is one of the last ones in our list here. And this one now accounts for the items found in this specific media that we are currently in. That might make it easier for the user to actually see, panorama by panorama, how many items of the ones there are he already found. So it'll start again as soon as I enter a new panorama, rather than keeping count of all items found in all media combined as I walk through the tour. And let's keep adding things. So this variable is like a normal text, just that in the tour it will translate to the value it has in real time. But being a normal text, I can combine it with other additional variables or with any kind of text. So I will insert a space and a slash, and that will just be shown as is because it's normal text. And now from all these, I will insert this one, which, if you remember, means in this current media, how many items are there in total. So this window would essentially show me how many items I have found out of the total items present in this media, whether it's a panorama, a 360 video, or anything else. Let's preview. Here we have our 2 variables, and we can see that we have currently found 0 out of 2 items that exist in this panorama. When I click one item, this counts and changes to 1. And when I click the second one, it shows I found 2 out of 2 items in this panorama. So I know I found everything and I can move on to the next panorama. And then in this panorama, I immediately see that there are 3 items to be found. and I haven't found any in here yet. Right, let's keep adding some more indicators. I would also like to show the scene score. So I take this variable. Instead of this bar, I can also use any kind of symbol or words or anything that would show after the value or number that the variable will turn into. And we add the total so that we would see the score we have right now in this media, and the second number, the total score achievable in this media. And the total score that can be achieved accounts for both elements with count to score action and quiz cards. Let's see the preview. So this value indicates that the total number of points in this panorama are 50, and we currently have 0 of those. When I find this item, the value increases to 10 because this hotspot was worth 10 points. That's something that the author defines. Same for the second hidden item, again worth 10 points, so my points are now up to 20. Here we have a quiz card which does not account in the hidden item score because it's a quiz card, but it does count to the score. I assigned 10 points to answer option A and 10 points to answer option B because both are correct, and so selecting those two, my score will go up by another 20. And the last 10 points are in a quiz card up here where answer A is the correct one and will give us 10 points. And that's how we achieved the total score of this panorama. In here, we could now continue adding more and more indicators to show whatever we want the user, the student, to see in terms of his performance, time, etc. I prepared a couple more, like the time here to the very right. And this is the time that the user still has remaining. But as we saw before, that can also be the elapsed time or simply the value that states that we have a total of 2 minutes to finish this tour. And of course, almost the most important indicator, the total score, which is simply the value of quiz score, which tells us the score we have throughout the whole tour in relation to the total or the maximum achievable score in the whole tour. I created the skin elements very stretched out and wide, so you could easily read the variables now in this video. But really, since the numbers in which they will convert in the tour are much smaller, we can also make these components smaller too, so they look more neat in the tour and are closer together. So it doesn't matter that now we see the text cut here in the skin editor, because like I said, once they become numbers in the published tour, they'll look perfect. They'll just be numbers. Right, so now that we know how to add variables that reflect the different e-learning elements in our tour, items, scores, time, etc. in terms of numeric values and indicators, let's have a look at how to show those same indicators but in a more visual way by means of a bar, a progress bar for instance. First, I created a mother container here. That's just a simple container with a gradient to black, and in here I'll drop the progress bar, which is a new skin element that we've added up here. This bar can now be personalized, changed in color, etc., but they're the same type of bar that you know from your 3D Vista virtual tours from when a video is playing or the loading bar of a panorama. Now you can find these bars up here in the skin tab, and you can use them for both those old cases as loading bar and for the new e-learning features. Click to place. And you can see the bar first adapts to the size of the container that I dropped it in. But being a skin element as any other, we can obviously down here personalize it completely and give it exact precise values that we think fit best. Smaller in height and width, and that is always in relation to the container that the bar is in. Let's center it in the container and in the middle. And it's visually not in the middle yet because the container has different padding values for top and bottom. If we adapt those, ta-da, the bar will move to the exact middle of the container. Right, so not only can you edit the bar's size and position, but you can also edit its style. What does that mean? That means you can change the colors. So we can change the bar from blue to any other color, say orange. So that changed the part of the bar that is progressing, that's counting the moving bit, so to speak, which is here at about 45% in the example preview. But we can also change the background bit, the part that's currently white. We can give it shadow and other effects. So much for the style of the bar. Now, in terms of functionality, we have to assign what it is that this bar should account for and reflect. The points in our tour, the time, etc. How do we do that? Over here, under Apply To, we have a list from which we can select the indicator we want to reflect with this progress bar. For instance, visited panoramas, which is what we saw at the beginning, where we can see, for instance, that out of the 5 panoramas in our tour, we have already visited 2, so the bar would be somewhere about here. We could also apply the bar to items found. If we have a total of 6 items and we found 1 so far, then the bar would be around here, and then keep advancing as we find more items. So a little more performance-based progress rather than just passing through panoramas. Or we could measure the time with it, showing both the time that we have left and the time we used up already. Similarly to items found, we could base the bar on a score where if our total score is 100 and we currently have 25 points, our bar would be around here and growing as we keep collecting more points. And finally, the old pre-e-learning use where we assign a bar to a viewer. Imagine we have a new little viewer window here where there's a video playing and we could assign the bar to that viewer and the bar would progress as the video plays, so a playback bar. And of course, if we had more than one score, they'd start showing up in this list here as well and we could select them. And that's a way to show all of the new options that came with the e-learning module in a more visual way. Let's give it a go with the variable time and see what it looks like in the tour. Hit preview. And see, on the one hand, we have the time indicator up here as a numeric value, but we can also see it down here in a more visual way with the progress bar, which moves as time passes. If we had assigned score instead of time, then this bar would advance little by little as we discover elements in this panorama and reply to questions correctly, all the way until we potentially reach 100% of the score. Right, so that's everything related to showing progress, time, and other indicators in the skin. But we can also have other skin elements carry e-learning related functions. A button, for instance. Imagine you want to add a button with text, say test, and that this button would appear, say, in panorama 3, floating on top, because you want your audience to see something in panorama 3 and then reply to a couple of questions here too. In that case, we'd give it one of the actions we already know from our normal hotspots inside panoramas. Let's take a question card. We'd fill that in completely as we have learned in the tutorial part 1 video. And now the only difference when doing this as a skin component rather than an actual hotspot inside a specific panorama is this part down here. With a skin element, like our button here, the program won't know which media this score or card should account in. So essentially, which media this question card will be a part of and count in. And so we have to assign this here. So while when I create a quiz card in a hotspot directly inside a panorama, the quiz card obviously knows that it should count that score to this particular panorama, it cannot know this when I create a general skin element, even though you may only show that skin element in one of the panoramas. So you still have to tell the quiz card to count its points to, say, panorama 3. So we click here and we select that this button and quiz card should appear and account in panorama 3. That is especially important if you show an indicator that shows scores or points divided by panoramas or scenes. So we have this particular button and quiz card count up here as soon as we are in panorama 3, but not in the other ones. If in turn you just show the overall general number of points not divided by scenes, then it's not necessary to assign where exactly that should count. It'll just count as soon as the user replies to it to the overall score of the entire tour. So that's that. As we saw before in the skin elements 2, we can use any e-learning related actions that we know from hotspot actions from the tutorial part 1 video. And finally, as we announced in the previous video as well, let's have a look at how to create several scores that coexist and what that may be useful for. In the last video, we learned that upon enabling quiz, the program automatically creates a score for us here. With this plus button up here, we can create as many further scores as we want. We can rename them and change their initial value, the value that they have when the user starts a tour, which is useful for when you want to use scores that start full and then deduct points as the user moves through the tour. And with the X, we can delete them. The idea behind having several scores is that you can differentiate between aspects in the tour and where they should account. So different elements in our tour can account to one or another score. As we saw with our skin elements and the way we can personalize them, we can reflect one score in one place and another score somewhere else, and thus differentiate clearly between two different performance measures. In this sample, we have one score up here, which defines the points we collect. And down here we have a separate score, which defines that when we get shot, we lose points from this one. So as you can see, when we get shot, that does not affect the score up here, but it does this one. How did we do that? In the e-learning subtab, we added a second score, so we now have one score for points and one for health. Since the health score is one that goes backwards or subtracts points, well, it should start at a certain number, which we made it start with 5 points when the tour starts. We then assigned that whenever somebody hits us, 1 point gets deducted, all the way until 5 hits, which is when the score would be at 0 points. And then in the skin editor, we placed an indicator or progress bar for each. This one just has the variables to show score 1 are points. And this small progress bar down here, as you can see here, applies to health, which is the new name of our score 2. And that's how we separate points from health in the skin. Now let's go into a tour project and see how we can create two different scoring lines. For instance, we have our quiz cards represented with the question mark icon. We have our hidden items, and we could also have a number of icons that when clicked will just pop up an info window. So in that case, it would make sense to differentiate between these types of hotspots where you have to find hidden elements and answer questions, which would enter into score 1, and these purely information-based hotspots, which may even be optional and would enter into score 2, to not mess with the other more test-based score. Therefore, let's first create a second score in the e-learning subtab. Let's call that info score and leave its initial value at 0. And now, in our panorama, let's give these hotspots the action add to score, so they count when being clicked with 10 points. But instead of counting these to score 1, we select the other score, our info score. Let's do the same to the second info hotspot. Okay, and by that we separated these two scores and their elements. So in the final report, we would now have two categories of scores that would both show. In the skin, all our indicators up here now only refer to the initial score. But if we want to see the new score, we'd have to create a new version of the variables. Therefore, let's copy one of these components, but name it info score. As soon as we have more than one score, our list of variables changes a little bit, and we now have this new one, which we will use as identifier of which score we want to use. So they're technically the same variables as the ones before, but applied to the new score too. So they just have the score ID in front of the usual text. The score ID is, if we go back to our scores in the Publish tab, this name right here. So in our case, it would be score 2, okay? Let's make this bigger so we can see better for now. Now let's replace this one, the variable we copied from the old indicator, and replace it by the exact same one but applied to score 2. Current score. As you can see, it's the same as before, only that we added score 2. And for this second variable, we would do the same, replace it with the one from the list, or directly type score 2 so that it now refers to score 2 rather than to the initial score. Let's preview. And indeed, it differentiates this from the rest of the score. If we click an info hotspot now, it adds the 10 points to our info score or score 2, but not to the total score, which instead of being a total score should now actually be called score 1 because it no longer refers to the total but only to the initial score, which is score 1. See how clicking an info hotspot now only adds points to the info score, and the other hotspots would then add to the other score, which we would have to rename these components to something like test score, as they no longer refer to the total of the scene. Let's finish this tutorial with one last e-learning function, which we haven't seen yet because it is not related to the skin or a hotspot or anything. But it's a very powerful function. You can only find that one here in the e-learning subtab on the right-hand side. If we click here, we will find a new function inside the e-learning actions that we haven't seen before, and that's trigger upon target. This allows us to program or schedule certain actions conditioned on a target or incident. So we could define that as soon as one of these objectives or indicators here, whether it's a certain time point or a certain number in a score that the user hits or a certain number of items they found, let's take points in our score. So as soon as the points in our score 1 are less than, equal or less than, equal as, equal or more than X points, then the tool will trigger or launch a defined action. And that can be any of the actions we have available in the program, not only an e-learning function, but any action. Here's an example. In our paintball game, we could define that as soon as our health score is below 5 points, then the game will be over. Game over would then be the action finish quiz, which is one of the actions in the e-learning category. And the user would automatically see his report then. Or another example, we could spike our e-learning tour with milestones or rewards so that as soon as someone gets to 100 points, they'll be shown a pop-up saying, "Congratulations, you've reached 100 points, let's go for 200. Or they'll be allowed to access a new panorama that previously was unavailable so as to sort of access a new level. Or we could define that as soon as the user has only 30 seconds left, there will be a small window popping up with the message, "Careful, your time is about to run out." So leave that to your imagination and really use this to create your script, your story, to get the message across and guide or incentivize your students all the way through this tour. And that's it for part 2 of this tutorial. That's how we create e-learning virtual tours that are visually more interesting and rich, showing the student or user where he or she is at and how they are doing at all times so they don't get lost. Now we are only missing the very last part where we show you how to publish these tours in a SCORM format. So for all of you who are using an LMS system, SCORM or Moodle, etc., how to take advantage of the data you collect about your students through these tours and monitor, document, and analyze this data in your usual LMS dashboard or control panel. And that's what we will look at in the third and last video tutorial, E-Learning, Training and Quizzing Part 3. Thanks for watching.